There is a specific moment that happens when you open a banking app. Not when the balance is low, not when there is a crisis. Just the ordinary Tuesday morning moment of opening the app to check the balance before a week of normal expenses. There is a quality to that moment, a slight tightening, a fractional breath hold, a small but real physical response that happens before the number appears on the screen. You have probably stopped noticing it. It has been happening long enough that it feels like a feature of your personality rather than a response to a circumstance. It is not a feature of your personality. It is a threat detection system that has been running continuously, in many cases for years, because the financial circumstances that would turn it off have not yet been in place. And the specific financial circumstance that turns it off is not a salary increase. It is not a promotion. It is not paying off a debt, though that helps. It is a very specific number sitting in a very specific account doing nothing at all except existing. 6 months of expenses. Fully funded. Untouched. My name is Nick, and I spend a genuinely unreasonable amount of time thinking about the psychology of money, specifically the places where financial decisions intersect with the neuroscience of how human beings experience safety and threat. If you have ever carried the low-grade financial anxiety I just described, the app opening moment, the slight tightening when an unexpected expense appears, the specific quality of Sunday night when a large bill is due Monday, hit subscribe because today we are going inside the 4 specific things that happen to your brain and your daily life when you finally have 6 months of expenses saved. And I will tell you right now what the 4 things are. The threat detection system turns off. Your risk tolerance genuinely increases. Your relationship with work changes permanently, and your relationship with long-term investing becomes psychologically sustainable for the first time. 4 changes. All of them specific, all of them research-backed. None of them described with the specificity they deserve in the personal finance space. Before we go through each one, let me introduce you to 2 people. Jordan earns a $68,000 a year. Monthly expenses run approximately $4,200. Jordan has been doing the right things financially for about 2 years, contributing to a retirement account, paying down a small amount of credit card debt, living within the budget. Net worth is approximately the $31,000, most of it in retirement savings. Emergency fund $2,100, about 2.5 weeks of expenses. Sam earns $64,000 a year. Monthly expenses run approximately $4,000. Similar financial behaviors to Jordan, consistent retirement contributions, modest debt reduction. Net worth is approximately $28,000. Emergency fund to $24,000. 6 months of expenses fully funded, sitting in a high yield savings account. Same income bracket. Similar financial behaviors. Similar net worths. But the quality of Jordan's and Sam's daily financial lives, and specifically the quality of their brain's relationship with financial decisions, is completely different. And the difference is almost entirely explained by one number: 6 months versus 2.5 weeks. Here is the first thing that changes. Change 1. The threat detection system turns off. The human brain has a structure called the amygdala whose primary function is threat detection. It monitors the environment, physical and social and financial, for signals of danger and activates the stress response when it finds them. And it is very good at its job. It was built over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution for exactly this purpose. The problem is that it was built to detect immediate physical threats: the predator in the grass, the hostile member of the competing tribe, and it cannot fully distinguish between those threats and the modern equivalent of financial vulnerability. Research published across multiple studies on financial stress and cortisol, the primary stress hormone, has documented consistently that financial insecurity produces elevated cortisol levels that are biologically similar to other forms of threat exposure. The brain running a financial threat response is not being dramatic or irrational. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. but it is running a response that costs real biological and cognitive resources that are not available for other things while the threat response is active. Jordan's amygdala runs a low-grade financial threat response continuously, not because Jordan is anxious by nature, not because Jordan is bad with money, because the financial circumstances that would turn off the threat response are not in place. 2.5 weeks of expenses in the emergency fund means the threat is real: a job loss, a medical bill, a car repair that exceeds the fund. Any of these would create an immediate financial crisis. The amygdala knows this in the way that the amygdala knows things not through conscious analysis, but through constant low-grade vigilance. The tightening before the app. The fractional breath hold. These are the physical signatures of a threat response running on low power. Sam's amygdala has turned the financial threat response off. Not completely. Sam is human and life is uncertain. But the specific threat of a sudden financial crisis has been addressed structurally. 6 months of expenses means that almost every realistic financial disruption, job loss, medical emergency, major repair, can be absorbed without a crisis. The threat is no longer immediate. The amygdala registers this. And when the amygdala is not running a financial threat response, cognitive and emotional resources that were allocated to that response become available for other things. The app opening moment is different for Sam. Not dramatic. Sam did not have a revelation. There was no morning where Sam woke up and felt suddenly peaceful about money. It happened gradually over the months that the fund was being built. And then it was just different. The slight tightening before the balance appeared gone, not suppressed, not managed, just absent. The threat had been addressed and the response had turned off because it no longer had a job to do. Change 2. Risk tolerance genuinely increases. This is the one that surprises most people who have not experienced it. And it is important to be precise about what changes and what does not change, because the change in risk tolerance is not a change in personality. Jordan does not become a braver person after building the fund. What changes is something more specific and more structural than bravery. Here is the mechanism. Risk tolerance in financial decision making is not purely a personality trait. It is a combination of personality and circumstance. And one of the most powerful circumstances shaping financial risk tolerance is the presence or absence of a financial buffer. When there is no buffer, when an unexpected expense would cause immediate financial harm, every financial decision that involves any uncertainty carries a specific additional cost. The cost of the threat it represents to stability. This cost is not always conscious, but it is always present, and it systematically reduces the perceived attractiveness of every option that carries risk. Research on decision making under scarcity, most notably the work of Mullainathan and Shafir, documented in their book Scarcity, has shown consistently that people making decisions from a position of resource scarcity make different choices than the same people making decisions from resource adequacy. Not because their values change, because the cognitive and emotional bandwidth available for decision making changes. Scarcity captures bandwidth, and financial vulnerability is a specific form of scarcity that captures bandwidth continuously, whether or not a financial decision is being made at that moment. When Sam's emergency fund was complete, the specific scarcity that had been capturing bandwidth was addressed, and the decisions that had previously felt risky, investing more aggressively, taking a career risk, negotiating for a higher salary, starting a side project, began to feel more accessible. Not because Sam became different, because the constraint that had been making them feel inaccessible was no longer operating. Jordan, without the fund, faces a specific additional cognitive cost on every financial decision that involves uncertainty. The cost is invisible. Jordan does not experience it as, "I cannot afford to take this risk because I have no emergency fund." It shows up as vague reluctance, an instinct toward caution, a preference for certainty that feels like personality, but is actually circumstance. The 6-month fund does not change who Jordan is. It removes a structural constraint that was shaping Jordan's decisions in ways Jordan was not fully aware of. Change 3. The relationship with work changes. This is the subtlest of the 4 changes and in some ways the most profound. And it is the one that most people report after the fact, looking back, as the change they least expected. Here is the mechanism. Work, for most people, is not fully chosen. It is required. The income is not optional. The mortgage, the rent, the groceries, the regular expenses of a life require it. And when income is not optional, the relationship with the source of that income carries a specific quality of dependency that shapes every interaction with it. The difficult manager becomes more difficult when the income cannot be walked away from. The project that does not align with values becomes harder to decline when declining it risks the paycheck. The negotiation for better compensation carries a specific anxiety when the current compensation is the only financial option available. Jordan works in a context of pure financial necessity. The job cannot be left. The income is not optional. This does not mean Jordan hates the job. Jordan may genuinely enjoy it. But the relationship with it has a specific quality of dependency that is always present, always slightly constraining, always slightly distorting the way the job feels and the decisions within it get made. Sam has something different, not wealth, not financial independence, just 6 months of expenses. But those 6 months create something real, the first genuine financial exit option Sam has ever had. Not a plan to use it. Not a desire to leave the job, just the structural reality that for 6 months, if something happened that made the job untenable, Sam could leave without immediate financial catastrophe. The option does not need to be used to change the relationship. The existence of the option is enough. Research on psychological safety in work contexts has documented consistently that the felt sense of genuine choice, even when the choice is not exercised, changes the quality of engagement, the willingness to raise concerns, the capacity to negotiate, and the overall experience of autonomy within a work environment. Sam negotiates the salary review differently, not with aggression, with the specific quality of someone who is choosing to be in this conversation rather than required to be in it. The difference is subtle. The outcomes are not. Most people do not notice this change until they reflect on the period before and after the fund was complete. Before, the job felt required. After, the job feels chosen. Same job, same salary, same manager. The fund changed nothing about the external circumstances. It changed the relationship with the external circumstances. And the relationship is where the daily experience lies. Change 4. The relationship with long-term investing changes. This is the most financially concrete of the 4 changes and the one with the most direct impact on long-term wealth-building outcomes. And it is the change that most directly explains why building the emergency fund first is not the slow path to wealth. It is the fast path with a longer setup. Here is the mechanism. For someone without a funded emergency fund, every dollar invested in a long-term account carries an implicit asterisk. This money is theoretically locked up for the long term, but practically available in a crisis. The asterisk is not stated. It is not always conscious, but it is structurally present in the decision to invest, and it has a specific consequence when the crisis arrives, and it will arrive because life produces financial disruptions regularly. The investment account becomes available again. The theoretical long-term money becomes practical short-term money, and the sale happens, usually at a bad time, usually during or after a market disruption, usually at a loss. Jordan has experienced this. 14 months of consistent investment contributions, followed by a 3,800 car repair that the emergency fund could not cover, followed by a painful sale of investment assets at a 12% loss to cover the repair. The 14 months of contributions were real. The investment behavior was correct. The structural foundation for the behavior was not in place. And without the structural foundation, the behavior was not sustainable. Sam's investment contributions are structurally different from Jordan's in one specific way: they are genuinely untouchable for the first time. Not because of rules or penalties or account restrictions, because the fund exists. The fund absorbs the car repair. The fund covers the medical bill. The fund handles the job loss. The investment account never needs to be touched for any of these events because there is a dedicated financial resource specifically designed to handle them. The behavioral difference over a decade is significant. Jordan's investment journey will include multiple interruptions: sales during disruptions, contribution pauses during crises, that reduce the long-term result below what the math predicts. Sam's investment journey will be closer to the mathematical projection because the structural support for consistent behavior is in place. Same income, different foundations, different outcomes. Here is the research anchor for everything we have discussed. The relationship between financial stress and cognitive function has been documented in multiple peer-reviewed studies. A landmark paper published in Science by Mulanathan Shafir and colleagues found that financial worry, specifically the cognitive load of financial insecurity, reduces effective cognitive bandwidth by the equivalent of 13 IQ points, not permanently, not structurally, but in the moment of experiencing financial stress, the cognitive resources available for decision-making, self-control, and long-term thinking are genuinely reduced. The research on cortisol and financial stress consistently shows that chronic financial insecurity produces elevated cortisol patterns similar to other chronic stress exposure, with the associated health, cognitive, and emotional costs that chronic elevated cortisol is known to produce. And research on emergency fund behavior specifically has documented that households without emergency funds are significantly more likely to carry high-cost debt, make suboptimal financial decisions under pressure, and liquidate long-term investments at inopportune moments. The 6-month emergency fund is not just a financial recommendation, it is a neurological intervention. It addresses the specific circumstance that is producing the threat response. It restores the cognitive bandwidth that the threat response has been consuming. And it creates the structural conditions under which genuinely better financial decisions about risk, about work, about investment become possible. Here is the gut check I want you to sit with before we get to the structural response. How many months of expenses do you currently have in a dedicated emergency fund, not in a retirement account, not in investments, in a liquid savings account specifically designated as the emergency fund? 1 month, 3 months, 0. Wherever you are, name it honestly, because the distance between where you are and 6 months is not just a financial distance. It is the distance between a threat detection system that is running and one that is not. Between constrained risk, tolerance, and genuine options. Between required work and chosen work. Between theoretical investing and structurally grounded investing. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The most common path taken by people who understand the case for long-term investing is to start investing before the emergency fund is complete. The logic feels sound: compound interest starts working immediately. Time in the market matters. Every month of delay is compounding foregone. The logic is not wrong about the math. It is wrong about the behavior. Because the investment account opened before the emergency fund is complete is not a long-term investment account. It is a high-risk savings account that carries market exposure. And the first significant unexpected expense will prove this, not as a theory, but as a specific, costly, emotionally painful transaction that undoes months of investment behavior and resets the psychological relationship with the market. Jordan has done this twice, not from irresponsibility, from a structurally incomplete financial foundation that made the theoretical long-term investment practically short-term. The fund was skipped to get to the investing faster. The investing got interrupted by the crisis the fund was supposed to handle. The net result: less wealth, more financial stress, and a more complicated relationship with investing than existed before the journey started. Sam built the fund first. It took 11 months. 11 months of not investing, or investing at a reduced rate while the fund was being built. The opportunity cost of 11 months of reduced contributions is real, but the fund has been complete for 3 years. 3 years of completely uninterrupted investment contributions. 3 years without a single asset sale under pressure. 3 years of a threat detection system that is off rather than running. The 11-month setup cost has been repaid many times over in financial returns, in cognitive bandwidth, in the quality of daily financial life. Here is the structural response. 3 specific decisions that make building the fund faster and more psychologically sustainable. First, separate the fund account physically and psychologically from everything else. Not a sub-account in the same bank with the same app interface. A different bank, a different login, a different mental category. The fund that is too easy to access is the fund that gets accessed. The physical separation is not inconvenience, it is architecture. A high-yield savings account at a separate institution with a 2 to 3 day transfer delay is accessible in a genuine emergency and inaccessible in a non-emergency moment of financial weakness. That friction is the structural design. Second, automate the build at a fixed monthly amount before anything else, not what is left over after everything else. A fixed automatic transfer on the day after income arrives, before discretionary spending has had the opportunity to absorb it. The amount does not need to be large. Consistency is more important than size. The fund built over 14 months at $350 a month is worth more than the fund budgeted for $600 a month and never reliably funded. Third, track the threat response metrics alongside the financial metrics, not just the fund balance. The felt experience of the app opening moment, the Sunday night quality, the specific texture of financial anxiety at each stage of the build. The fund balance is a financial metric. The change in the threat response is the psychological metric that explains why the fund balance matters. Tracking both keeps the destination visible, not just the number you are building toward, but the specific felt experience you are building toward. Jordan is building the fund now. After the second investment liquidation, after the honest accounting of what the skip to invest path actually produced, after the specific decision to build the structural foundation before adding to the investment account. The fund is at the 14,000 and 3.5 months of expenses. The app opening moment is already different than it was at 2100. Not gone, not peaceful, but quieter. The threat detection system is not off, but it is running at a lower level. Each month's contribution to the fund is not just a financial act. It is a neurological one. Sam's fund has been complete for 3 years. The app opening moment, just an app opening. No tightening. No fractional breath hold. Just a number on a screen that represents 6 months of covered life, sitting quietly in a high-yield account, doing nothing at all except holding the threat detection system in the off position. That is what you are building toward, not just the number. The specific felt quality of a brain that is no longer running a financial threat response. The specific experience of a work relationship that is chosen rather than required. The specific durability of an investment account that will never need to be touched because the fund exists to touch instead. The specific cognitive bandwidth of a person whose amygdala has been given permission to stand down from financial vigilance. 6 months of expenses. Fully funded, doing nothing at all, changing everything. I am not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice. These are patterns I have watched play out with real numbers and real brains attached. Take what is useful and leave the rest. If this names something you have been carrying without a name, drop a comment and tell me where your fund currently sits. 0, 1 month, 3 months. Complete. I actually read every single one. And if you want to see the video on why most people sabotage themselves right before their first $100,000, It is right there on your screen. The fund and that video are the same conversation from two different angles. I will see you in it.